You are one of the few politicians who have something positive to say about development. Everything you have found yourself as a very positive person.
I try to be. There's enough negativism around on the planet,
Exactly.
so I don't want to add to it.
Exactly. So, what's your vision for the state?
Well, frankly, this is where a bit of the negative comes in, because I was a huge early booster of the Kerala model. If you've read my book, India from Midnight to the Millennium, I called it the Malayali miracle, and I did this comparison with those days' figures of the US and Kerala, pointing out how on so many indicators Kerala and the US were parallel to each other, except that we at that point were 1/70th of their GDP. And so I said this is a terrific achievement and so on. In the course of that book was published 25 years ago. In the course of these last 25 years, some of the flaws have become apparent. And I think what is now unfortunately rather clear is that a social development success story resting heavily on three main sources of revenue, let's be very blunt: Gulf remittances, excise from alcohol consumption, and tourism, can be very vulnerable. COVID was a shock already, a mega shock, because it knocked out the entire tourism revenue, which is why one of the first things that the government opened up during the lockdown was alcohol, so they could start collecting some excise. The Gulf remittances are always vulnerable to domestic policy shocks in those countries. If they suddenly decide to start sending people back, or just saying that they need to do more indigenization, we will have a double whammy. We will lose a major source of funds coming in, and we'll also find a challenge in absorbing the people returning, who could potentially become a burden on the economy. We don't attract industry, and I've tried. Actually, for a year and a half after I left the UN, I was an unofficial brand ambassador for Kerala, simply because I was enthusiastic about the idea. I tried to promote investment in Kerala. I remember when Elamaram Karim was industry minister, he came to New York and I hosted a dinner for him with 25 high net worth potential investors. The problem is, unfortunately, the state's reputation has got to a point that even foreign investors who know the state, Malayalis, Marunadan Malayalis, will not invest. And this has got us to a stage where we need to rapidly invent a new paradigm that will transform the state for the future. We have some obvious strengths. You call me upbeat, I'm upbeat about the fact that we have a great environment, by and large. We have tremendously intelligent, well-educated people. We have an atmosphere in which some kinds of industries can flourish, the obvious ones being hospitality, wellness, healthcare, and also IT. I really think that those who pioneered the IT wave in the state had the right idea, and it's worth interrogating as to why we were not able to take it further forward. Why did we never become Cyberabad? Why did we never become Gurgaon? Why is it that the first techno park in India is in Thiruvananthapuram, and it remained a relatively minor player for a very long time? And there are a number of reasons, and I've been trying to interrogate people as to what they look for when they consider investments and why they don't always invest as we would like them to. My gut instinct is that the game is not lost. There are a few things we need to do to make it more attractive. Certainly some of our laws need updating. During the last election, when the Congress put me in charge of their manifesto, I held meetings with the GTech, the representatives of the tech companies in Trivandrum and Kochi joined by video conference. And I was startled to discover we still have some rather antediluvian restrictions on work hours for women and things like that, which have been a drag on the IT sector's compliance problems. So that's one kind of thing we can certainly improve. We need to invest heavily in broadband connectivity. But we can also show more imagination in certain policies. For example, much more connectivity between the university campuses and the workplace. Many students are hungry for internship opportunities. We have no structured way of either doing it, funneling it, or giving credit for it, so that students as a result don't have the kind of opportunities that we could provide them. We don't also seem to be doing enough to help encourage a change in the mindset of people when it comes to regulations. I've met too many investors in diverse sectors. A chap who came and set up a hotel, a chap who tried to start an industry, somebody else trying to do retail work, who all complained about the incredible obstacles that were placed in their path. And frankly, it's not often just the government. Yes, sometimes bureaucrats, especially rent-seeking bureaucrats or ideologically minded bureaucrats, can be a problem, and I have examples of that also. But sometimes it's often our own public. I mean, we have sort of a lot of ideological fervor. People will file cases at the drop of a hat, PILs, legislation of various sorts, which often tie up an investor in knots, and after a while they say, why is this worth it for us? So when the investor is, say, some Gulf Malayali who has put all his life savings into a business or a factory or something in Kerala, the poor chap has no option, he has to slog it out, and we've had one or two sad cases of people even committing suicide, having lost everything because of this. And then we've had cases of people just being so frustrated and thwarted, but having no choice but to stick it out and struggle through, and have incurred losses rather than profits from their investment. And then you've got the very big guys who just walk away and say, never again Kerala. That's got to change, and we've got to really encourage a climate in which this, I mean, for example, an Investor Protection Act is something that I recommended in our manifesto. An investor protection policy accompanied by a law that gives investors a certain amount of assurance of security for their investment when they come would, I think, go a long way to attracting more money. I was very interested to see the piece in your paper today that I think it was the 22,000 crores that were pledged during the last summit organized by the state government, of which I think barely 200 crores have actually come, or 100 crores have barely come, precisely because all these pledges could not be fulfilled because of various of these different kinds of obstacles on the way. So I think we need to change a lot of things, but at the same time I think the potential is great. In the tourism area, we've done a lot, but there's still more untapped potential. With nature tourism, I mean, there's so much else, ecological tourism, a certain amount of adventure tourism. But again, we have to get the cooperation of people. I mean, there's potential, huge amount of potential for things like windsurfing and so on outside, but we have to persuade our coastal communities that this is also in their interest. Because, I mean, there has been some episodes of clashes when these have been attempted. But we should take advantage of some of our blessings. And when communities see that other areas have prospered because they cooperated, the others will also cooperate. So all of this requires a government with a focus on growth. And that growth must be, and I've said this word, must be in the interests of people. Development is about people. It is not about GDP numbers and dollar signs only. It's got to be that we have to be able to demonstrate to people that when the state grows and prospers, you prosper too. And if that happens, I think we can really go well. But the advantages we have to really accentuate and not do anything to undermine them, which means education, environment, health. These are great strengths of Kerala, greater than any other state in India. We need to really double down on them, make sure none of those are undermined, and then try and get these things going.
And what about this change in mindset that you said?
That's the toughest job. But it requires, first of all, exhortation and discussion, but most importantly, it requires example setting. Show successful investments and how people have benefited from them. So every time that something is attempted, people's instinct is to resist, and then the investment runs away. That's the end of the story, and it never happens again. If we can show examples where we can make it work to the benefit of local communities, and then say to others, look what happened here. Don't you want that kind of thing for yourself? That is kind of the approach I'm talking about. But it's a long haul. It's a long haul, and certainly it's frankly a generational challenge we're facing. It's not just for one government and one term. We have a whole, we have years of work ahead to make this happen, but somebody has to start the ball rolling.
I think that brings us to today's issue, that Vizhinjam Port. Vizhinjam Port was a project that you were behind all over. Right from the beginning, you were.
When I first came to Thiruvananthapuram to be a candidate here, the number of people who came to me saying this has been a dream project for 15 years, or even long. I came in 2009, that was the election I first fought. 1992, 17 years previously, it was when M.V. Raghavan had introduced the thing in the A.K. Antony government in the Niyama Sabha, and people had seized the imagination, people were very interested. There's some obvious advantages. I mean, here you have a port with 24 meters of undredged depth. The state has sunk so much money into Velarpadam, and they have to spend crores every day dredging the silt out of the water. And here you've got 24 meters naturally God-given, and you're only 8 nautical miles away from the international sea lanes. And on top of that, our country is spending a fortune in Colombo, because where is the transshipment taking place? It's all taking place in Colombo. So all the goods are coming. They reach Colombo port. Colombo collects fat fees. They're then transferred into smaller ships and brought to Indian ports. We have the capacity to develop a port that could actually make a big difference. So it seemed to me an extraordinary sort of a no-brainer, as the Americans say. Why didn't we take this up? So I took it up. The state governments were uniformly enthusiastic, both the communist government and the UDF government. But the challenge by then became the problem of getting eligible investors to invest. So the first couple of tenders floated by first by the previous government and then by the Vizhinjam government came afoul, because the winning bid involved in one case a Chinese consortium that was deemed ineligible by the UPA government in the center, since at that point our policy was that China will not be permitted to invest in our ports. And then there was a second case when
Asian company, I think.
I think there was a consortium. So in every case, the winning bids were consortiums which included some suspect players. So one was, the first time around, it was a bid led by a company that had the Chinese involved. And the second ineligible bid, I think, was where one of the partners in consortium bid was deemed to have insufficient credentials in terms of finances and capitalization and so on to be considered eligible. So in both cases, the state government picked the bid and the central government rejected it. When the third tender was released, which is under UPA, under UDF, I beg your pardon, UPA 2, when I was a minister in UPA 2 and it was released here, there was no bid. And I remember the chief minister saying to me, what do we do? I said, extend the date, let's see. And it was sheer fluke, I mean, just absolute fluke, that I happened to be on the same flight on Air India to New York, non-stop, with Gautam Adani, whom I had never known before. But we knew of each other, we spoke, and I said, look, I've heard you're interested in ports. Do you know about this dream opportunity to build a port? And I'm surprised you're not bidding. So he said, tell me, I didn't know, and we actually spent some time on the flight, where I told him all the arguments as to why Vizhinjam mattered. And he said, sure, I'll think about it. I'll get my... the next thing I knew, in a few days, they had bought the bid document, the tender document. And eventually they came through with the only viable bid. There were other bidders who were deemed unviable at the preliminary screening stage, but the Adani bid was a viable bid. And then we were also blessed that the UPA government had developed. There was a particular retired official called Gajendra Haldia, who'd come up with this concept of viability gap funding for ports. And he came and advised us, essentially for free. I don't think as far as I'm aware, I don't think the Vizhinjam government paid him anything. He came and advised us on how to structure things so that some viability gap funding would be available to the central government. Then, of course, the central government changed. So I had to go and see Arun Jaitley, the then finance minister, and explain the argument for this. He was helpful and understanding. And eventually, we got the whole clearance for the funding as well as the approval of the bid. Now, since then, Vizhinjam has had genuine problems and some man-made problems. So the genuine problems are Oki came and knocked off a good chunk of the work. In fact, actually destroyed some of the preliminary construction of the breakwater and also delayed further construction. Some of the man-made problems relate to the fact that the port company, the Adanis, were offering a rate for stone which was perhaps the Gujarati rate but not the Kerala rate, and therefore they were not able to get stone, and that again delayed the project. And finally, when stone quarrying issues came up, there were environmental objections, and then they couldn't get enough stone locally and they had to go elsewhere. Now getting stone from Tamil Nadu is turning out to be a challenge because there are people objecting there to the weight-bearing lorries on their roads, and this is not Ours is not an easy country to do conventional sort of development work. But all this process, plus subsequently the 2 floods, and then the COVID period and the lockdown, have all delayed them. So they're about 1.5 years behind schedule already. And I'm grateful that the Chief Minister chose to retain me on the director board of VISL, which had been appointed by the Vizhinjam government. And therefore I'm party to the discussions, which have actually levied a fine on Adani for being behind the clock, and he in turn has gone to arbitration as his contract allows him to. So we're in a process where we are demanding that he work faster, that the Adani Port Limited should work faster to complete the port. So it's an inopportune moment for this particular agitation to demand that the work be stopped, because obviously when the state government is asking for the work to go faster, it cannot equally or easily agree to stopping it. Now, on the question of the impact of the port, there are 2 or 3 things on this port agitation that you should be aware of. The first is there is a genuine human problem with the coastal communities. I have been raising this in Parliament for 10 years, even before Vizhinjam Port construction started, that coastal erosion is a serious problem in Kerala, which absolutely has to be addressed and has not been addressed. And I'll tell you that we are seeing significant damage to the coast because of a simple unwillingness to commit or find the funds for simple seawalls, pulimutta as we call them, the groins as they're called, Groynes. And these are where you basically build a sort of T jutting out of the thing that blocks the sea waves coming and creates tranquil areas near the coast and therefore prevents erosion. Tamil Nadu, right next to us, has spent 118 crores over the next 50 kilometers from us into, towards Kolachel and that side, constructing these groins, whereas we have not even been able to find a single crore of state money to build any pulimuttas. The last one that was built in some of my coastal areas in my constituency goes back 25 years. I tried to shame the government by diverting 1 crore of my MP funds to 2 seawalls, but these are very modest constructions. Unfortunately, because of the expense involved in quarrying stone, building or even if you want tetrapods and so on, it's going to cost you money, and you've got to be prepared to commit the kind of money only governments have to do this. So I said in Parliament that if China took 2 inches of our land, we'd be up in arms saying that this is a national issue, our army would be on full alert. The sea has taken 64 square kilometers of my constituency. This is Bharat Ka Bhumi, or Bharat Ki Bhumi, that has gone, and no one is bothered. I raise this in Parliament, I get a letter from the central government saying it's the state government's problem, more or less. I mean, those are the paraphrasing of their argument. I go to the state government, they say, we don't have the money. So, we've got a situation where people are not prepared to invest, and the result of this is you can see it every monsoon. Every year you will see not just that entire beachfronts are disappearing, the most famous being, all of you living in Thiruvananthapuram have been to Shangumugam Beach. I used to go there routinely just to shoot the breeze with constituents. There is no beach anymore, it's gone. The airport road collapsed because of the attacks of the sea. Houses along the coast have been falling into the water. It's a calamitous situation. It is actually a humanitarian emergency. So you can't blame the fishing community, the coastal community, for saying, who cares for us? What's going to happen to us? I am not certain about the argument that some are making that this is because of port construction. First of all, the port construction, as we have been complaining, is not that far advanced. Of the 3.1 kilometers of breakwater there to construct, they barely constructed just over 1 kilometer. So I can't believe that alone can cause the kind of... Besides, I've seen the damage starting from well before the port construction took place. Secondly, there is also no doubt that the very effective construction in Tamil Nadu has diverted a lot of seawater to our coast here. So that the neighboring villages, for example, in the area of Poyur, there are these villages called South Kollam Code and Parithiur and so on, which I visited yesterday, where the coastline is disappearing. In places where people remember there were homes are now just sea. People where kids grew up playing football are now just nothing. And I have managed to give them some stones to block further progress. But even the stones are not terribly thrilled with, because that restricts their access to put their boats out and their nets out and so on. In fact, one of the women there was reminding me that, a couple of years ago, I had come and joined the fishermen in casting a net. It's a great experience, this, and you throw the net out, and of course, these young, strong guys actually go out into the sea for that end of it, but we stand on the beach and we cast from this side. And then you catch the fish. Now that is simply turning out to be unviable, partially because of how far the sea has come and partially because the fish are disappearing from near the coast. So their lives are tough. They're all below the poverty line families. Whether or not the government gives them that recognition, they are. And these poor people are saying, number one, no one is attending to our needs. Number two, the coastline is disappearing, our homes are falling into the sea, and they don't give us rehabilitation. There are people living in warehouses, stacked like goods for an age, literally for the last few years in some places. And when rehabilitation is offered, it is far too far inland for them to have a viable life as fisher people, as coastal people. They want to be near the sea, access to their boats and so on. So what do we do for them? I went to have a very passionate meeting, passionate on their side particularly, with the Latin Catholic Church representatives, because all these communities are Latin Catholic and they are represented by rather strongly engaged parish priests, and that goes up the chain. So Archbishop Neto and his key advisors, and Archbishop Neto himself is from this community, born in a coastal village. So they feel very, very strongly about this, and having got a sense of what they're concerned with, they said literally it's an existential question for us. Our community is going to disappear. Our homes are going to fall into the sea. They're going to relocate us inland. There's going to be no sea coast left. As it is, frankly, the fishing life is not terribly viable for all sorts of reasons, which is a separate issue, but we can talk about that if you're interested, including the removal of kerosene subsidies, the huge problems of the distances they have to go, because all the 12-kilometer economic zone that we have, the fish is so overfished that it's pretty much impossible to catch it if these fellows have to go further out. And then they have to compete with foreign mechanized trawlers. And they don't have there's supposed to be a Blue Revolution scheme, but not one penny of that has come to Kerala so far to give them cold storage facilities, mechanized fishing abilities, boats and so on, which would be welcome, because these people can also benefit, but they haven't got it yet. So in these circumstances, what you're seeing is that their lives are already very, very tough, more and more unviable, some would say, made worse during COVID when all the marketplaces were closed. Even if you caught fish, you couldn't sell it anywhere. So they've really suffered for a couple of years unduly. And then on top of that, the erosion has been attributed, rightly or wrongly, I think more likely to be wrongly, to the port.
What drives Shashi Tharoor, the politician? Is it the political ambition or the political ideology? Don't tell me it's working for the people.
Working for the people. Public service. No,
especially because,
I've just come to you from hearing about 250 sob stories, petitions, various problems, and there's no question that our politics is very different from what you would see in most other democracies, and certainly in the West or anything else, because a lot of it is, that people, the expectations people have from those they've elected are at a very sort of almost intimate level. Personal problems, financial problems, marital problems, job situations, transfers. The kinds of things that you're constantly having to deal with. I'm not saying those are intellectually satisfying things, but they are things which at the same time are part and parcel of what politics is all about in India. And I'm satisfied to be able to say that there is, through one's effort, every week a number of such instances where I've been able to deliver a result for somebody. Maybe not for the general public, because the big development projects require a different sort of thing, but for individual cases, I would say every week of these years as an ordinary MP, I've been able to deliver results that have been morally satisfying, if not intellectually. It can be, people stuck in a desperate situation where I happen to be able to pick up the phone and get an ambassador to make an exception for a visa or other permit of some sort, where I can reach out to government officials or ministers or senior officials and get some problem solved for individuals. And that you can do that because you have a right to do it. As an MP, you can call on behalf of this, and then at the same time, you are able to influence people in a way that helps ordinary people. So that's been, to my mind, a rather satisfying thing. Other kinds of satisfaction, less so, because you may have an idea of what you would like to see done for your state or for your country or on foreign policy or this and that, and the most you can do is make a speech in Parliament. And the amusing thing is that half the time now Parliament is disrupted by people who believe that disruption is more politically useful than debate. So one prepares and one goes to speak, and one never finds very many opportunities to show that one can make a contribution there to politics. So there are frustrations. I will say that in a democracy, politics is still the only way you can truly make a difference in the lives of people. Maybe I shouldn't say the only way, but it's perhaps the most impactful way. But for that, you need to have, in our system, a vehicle, and the vehicle is your party, getting enough strength to be able to make those decisions. So there I have certainly found we've faced our share of challenges, as your questions imply. And I am giving it all very serious thought as to whether this is necessarily the most useful thing that I could be doing for the next few years. A number of people have come to me saying, the way things are going, why not turn your attention to the state, where at least the party is a serious contender for power, unlike in the center. And there are other ideas and other proposals being made by various people. So let me just say that, having given up an awful lot to come into Indian politics, I gave up a rather comfortable life, considerably larger income. I mean, now I have to write articles to be able to pay my staff salaries, because we get very modest allowances from the government, as you probably don't realize. Everyone thinks politicians are pampered and so on and so forth. If you look at our salaries and look at our expenses, it's a miracle that people don't have to be corrupt, provided you can legally make money elsewhere. In my case, I legally make money through my words. Others legally make money through their law practice or other things like that. But those who don't have other means of making money, you cannot run 2 offices in Delhi and your constituency on 50,000 rupees a month and 1 constituency salary, which is all the government gives you. So you have to understand that it's a tough thing to be a political representative. But having said that, the way politics is in a democracy, it is something that has offered me a certain kind of moral satisfaction that I would argue is even greater than the moral satisfaction that came from the sense of the UN that you're working for the world and working for humanity. All that's wonderful, but the truth is that you're still a bureaucrat, right? All I'm saying is that I am seriously examining all the options that are available to me in the present situation, of which one, again, as we always say very dutifully, depends, of course, on the party, whether the party will give me the ticket to contest the seat again. But if the party were to so decide, that would be one option. And there are other options, and I will have to weigh all the options in my mind.
What exactly are the other options?
No, I don't want to go into all that now, because frankly, the whole point is that the options are in one's mind. I have not been somebody in my entire working life who has asked for anything, but equally I have never been somebody who has shied away from an opportunity or a challenge to make an impact. That's literally from my childhood. I remember as a child in school having to ask the question, why do you think we all exist on this planet? And I said the only reason must be to make a difference. Otherwise, why bother? And so if you are going to try and make a difference, then seize the opportunities that enable you to do so. And I've never shied away from that. So let me see what the opportunities are, and I will then, in due course, when the time is ripe.
Can I ask you a connected question? Like, you know the question and I know the answer, but still, both AAP and BJP are very keen to rope you in.
Oh, they're not the only ones.
Oh.
But the point is that, I have the great inconvenience of having ideological convictions. And those convictions go back way before my entry into politics. My books, I published my first book in 1981, Reasons of State. So for 41 years, I've been laying out a fairly consistent vision of the world, which is, for lack of a better term, a liberal vision. And I am, in that sense, an old-fashioned liberal. I don't go around judging people. I don't go around telling people what they should be. but I do go around trying to work for what I believe is my vision of a better society, a better world, a better policy, a better anything. That's the kind of effort that I'm prepared to make. And I've done this and I've written things when doing so put me at odds with what is now my party. Because, for example, I was very critical of the emergency. I was very critical of many aspects of the state control of the economy, all of which I have written and published, so I'm not going to deny them. In fact, I still remember that when I first contested in 2009, the CPI would place a very prominent lawyer, later a president of the Bar Association. In all these public debates we would have before the channels, he would be sitting in the front row with a copy of the Malayalam edition of India from Midnight to the Millennium. And his first question would be to read out some nasty thing I'd said, about the emergency or whatever. To which my answer was, listen, I stand by my words. I meant everything I wrote, but I'm not fighting the elections of 1977. I'm fighting the elections of 2009. To which he really had no better answer. But he would still come at the next debate and again read some other excerpt. The truth is my track record is there. It's a paper trail. My books are all in print. You can find them. I can't deny anything I've said, and I've stood by everything. My worldview has been what it is. But the truth is that the Congress Party post-91 on the economic front, and throughout, I would say, on other fronts, has been a party that I found congenial, and that's why I'm with them. So a party that doesn't share some of the same ideological premises would probably not be an easy place for me to fit into. Because as you all know, I tend not to bite my tongue very often. Once in a while I'll keep silent, but I will not say anything I don't believe in.
Okay, so can we rule out BJP? I mean, from what you said.
I think that's pretty obvious. And in fact, if I were in the BJP, I would not invite Shashi Tharoor to come and join us.
So, but AAP is still there. That option could be a possibility.
Look, I have respect for many parties because each in their own way has their own good qualities. In Delhi, we are opposed to AAP. I'm not going to sit here giving them an endorsement and then being accused of anti-party activities. But I will say some of the work they've done is good, and the service delivery aspect. We've seen the same with 2020 in Kerala. If you can deliver services to the public effectively, that's not a bad thing. I don't think that we should knock that. When it comes to other parties, and there are other regional parties in the country which may choose to have national aspirations, there are parties which have got broadly the same sort of ideology as the Congress, because they've at some point spun away from the Congress. And you know which parties I'm talking about. So it's difficult to say that ideologically there is an incompatibility, because very many parties in our country share broadly the same orientation as the Congress when it comes to the mixed economy, foreign policy, political democracy, freedom of the press. I mean, you name sort of 10 touchstone issues and there'll be 10 parties that claim to adhere to all of those. So in that sense, the idea of India, so-called, I mean, I've often said, when people say, what gives you or anyone in the Congress the right to talk about the idea of India, my answer is it comes to me from the Constitution. My idea of India is the idea of India embedded in the Constitution. That's what it's all about. So in that sense, as far as I'm concerned, I would say to you frankly that all the parties that subscribe to that same ideology would be compatible. So it's not that I'm going around with a litmus test that only applies to one or two places. There may be many possibilities. But right now, I still have hopes that the Congress will turn out to be the right vehicle for advancing this dream of India. But I'm very conscious that you can have all the right ideas and still not be an effective vehicle. Or you can be a very effective vehicle for the wrong ideas. And that's frankly what we're seeing in many ways with the ruling party today in Delhi.
But if you want to come back to Kerala, do you think you'll be welcomed here by the Congress state unit, given the equation you have with them?
Who are? I mean, the Congress is all of us, right? All of us who work in the Congress are in the Congress. So it's
state leadership, to be specific, the state Congress leadership.
The current state leadership has an excellent relationship with me, and for that matter, so do the previous.
As an MP, but not as a Kerala leader.
Well, I have not claimed to be a Kerala leader. I've only claimed to be an MP for Thiruvananthapuram.
So, are you happy to spend the next 5
so
years
far.
of your life? But the next 5 years of your life.
Why do you want to lock me into some narrow straitjacket? We're talking about the last 13 years. I've been MP for Thiruvananthapuram.
We all believe you deserve a better space. Not just a
your
random
political
MP
career seems to be stuck.
Exactly.
You are in Congress, you are an MP. But beyond that, and where is Shashi Tharoor headed? We would like to know.
Let me just say, Shashi Tharoor is not likely to stay in a rut for very long. But let me leave it at that.
Right man in wrong party.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I hear that too often and for too long. I might have to take it seriously.
You are part of the Bharat Jodo core team. And even after that G23 revolt and all, Rahul Gandhi keeps a very close relationship with you.
I don't know that that's frankly, relationships with individuals have their own ups and downs and they have their own character. I wouldn't go around claiming any particular relationship with anybody. But all I can say is that, or for that matter, any bad relationship with anybody. As I say, I'm a non-judgmental kind of guy. I don't go, have you ever heard me bad-mouthing anybody? I just don't go around playing this game of attacking people. When attacked, I will usually smile and move on. I'm not somebody who frankly believes very much in that kind of politics. That's simply not me. It's not even that kind of personal relationship. Frankly, I've been through a phase in this country's life when a lot of people I knew were saying things behind my back. And I decided that you could either wallow in depression about it, or you could just say that, that says more about who they are and how they think than it says about you. As long as you know who you are, you're anchored in yourself, and you have a clean conscience, and you know what you're doing, and what you've done and not done, let people say what they want to. At the end of the day, we can't constantly be living for others. So do the right thing.
But
And do the thing right.
Another option, the Congress president election are upcoming. Why can't you be a candidate for the presidency?
Let's wait for the elections to be announced and see what the options are there also. I'm not saying necessarily that I would necessarily be a candidate, but I would say that I hope there'll be if, as seems more and more likely, the sort of heir apparent chooses not to be a contestant, then others will come forward and we'll have a good set of choices, I hope.
You were part of the G23. What exactly is the current position? Are you still part of that?
This is frankly a bit of a media myth, the G23. It was a letter drafted by some of our colleagues, which some of us were invited to sign. And in many cases, it was simply because during the COVID lockdown, we happened to be in Delhi, or we could go through Delhi, or some of us could go through Delhi, that we were able to sign the letter. There were not just 23, there were perhaps 100 people who would have willingly signed the letter but didn't come to Delhi during the lockdown period when the letter was finalized and issued. So it is not, and nor has it remained, as you know, a particularly coherent group with any organizational entity or any leadership or any regular meetings or anything like that. There were a group of people who met. The composition of that group shifted from time to time depending on things. And as you know, at least one or two of the signatories are no longer in the party, and one or two have dissociated themselves from it overtly and publicly. And as far as I'm concerned, I signed something because by and large I agreed with its contents. There was one sort of contradiction within the letter that I was not happy with, and I said so. But I was told, look, 7 people already signed the letter before you, so we can't change it now. You take it or leave it. And I felt that some of these things needed to be said, so I signed it. And one of the things that needed to be said was that the party was too important for the future of India to be allowed to drift, that it needed some serious revival and institutional revival within the party. That I still stand by, and I think it was an effort to strengthen the party, not to weaken it. And it was an effort to have a more effective Congress, not to undermine it. If it was misunderstood by some, then I think it's a pity, because I really think it was a sincere effort. At a time when especially after the drubbing of 2019, a lot of people were in the doldrums. We were anxious to see us coming out of the dumps and moving forward in a positive way.
Did you meet Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi after that? Did you have any meeting?
Yes, I've met Sonia Gandhi several times after that, and Rahul Gandhi once or twice. Sonia Gandhi, as interim president, has not been inaccessible or anything. We've had meetings on work matters all the time, and yes, certainly I find her, she's certainly had health issues, we won't deny that, but she hasn't been sort of absent at the wheel. She's been very much there, working.
The concerns were raised with her also, like the concerns you had?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you probably know that in December of 2021, I think it was it 21? I'm losing track now. May have been 2020. December of 2020. There was a big meeting on the lawn of Sonia Gandhi's residence in Vizhinjam Port with 7 or 8 of our signatories and 8 or 9 of her close senior advisors that thrashed through all the issues in the letter. So it's not that the letter was buried. And again, as I say, there was no formal organization, but she invited those who happened to be around in Delhi at that time, and she invited some of her senior advisors, and it was a good and constructive discussion. And we feel we're all in the same party, we all have the same objective to see the Congress flourish, and it was done in that spirit.
Rahul was also part of that.
Yeah, he was there, Priyanka was there, all three Gandhis were there, and so were pretty much most of the senior names you can think of, Chidambaram, Kamal Nath, many other senior colleagues were present, and 7 or 8 of us who had signed the letter were present.
So what exactly is the problem that is plaguing the Congress? Like, according to you, what should be done as a way forward?
Well, as you know, we had a huge Chintan Shivir in Udaipur to discuss the way forward. And one of the things we came up with was this Bharat Jodo Yatra. Though in the end, the way it's worked out, it's being an even more ambitious thing than perhaps we had conceived. Many of us thought of it as kind of a road yatra that would take place roughly from Gandhiji's birthday to the winter session of Parliament. What it's now turning out to be is a Pada Yatra which will take potentially 5 months, and it's a huge exercise, which will again be punctuated by state elections in November, December, and so on. So that was the ultimate decision that was made, and that's the way it's going to go. But the concept, in any case, the thinking was that we need something that will galvanize both the workers and the public, both to give attention to the issues the party is raising, and to be mobilized behind the party. That's very much the hope. We've thrown it open, though the number of designated marchers will be from the party itself. We've thrown it open to any like-minded people who wish to join. Civil society, ordinary citizens, other parties, everyone is open.
So you think that will cure all the...
No, it's just one example of a newfound determination to actually take to the streets, because as you know, one of the charges that was made is that the Congress is not just an ineffective opposition. The argument was we're not doing enough to highlight the issues on which we need to oppose the government. So going out, taking issues to the streets and doing so throughout the country is also one way of doing it. You've also seen that a number of issues, price rise in particular, we've held rallies in every state capital. So it's not that we are sticking to just noisy demonstrations in Parliament, as use somebody's phrase, attacking us. We are also trying to take the issues to the people and get people mobilized.
How do you see the prospects of Modi the next term?
No, there's no doubt that Mr. Modi is very popular, particularly in northern India and in the so-called Hindi belt. He is undoubtedly hugely popular. It was silly to pretend otherwise. Whether you call it a personality cult or whatever, he is larger than life, in many ways larger than his own party, but his party also is very effectively organized. It's by far the best funded party. Already in 2014, when they were in the opposition, they were better funded than most of us. By 2019, they were outspending all the candidates they were opposed to cumulatively. They came a fairly distant second in Thiruvananthapuram, but they would have, in terms of their visibility in the constituency, you could have added me and the CPI candidates and the independent candidates together in terms of posters, buntings, rallies, jeeps, platforms. The BJP would have exceeded all of that combined. But the truth is that they're well funded, they're also very well organized. I will be very honest and say that my own constituency, we've seen the RSS workers coming from all over the state. There were few constituencies that were targeted. Look at Thiruvananthapuram in 2019. Prime Minister Modi came twice. Amit Shah came 3 times. Nirmala Sitharaman and Prakash Javadekar were here repeatedly. They had literally every RSS shakha in Kerala sending people to do door-to-door campaigning. I know Congress sympathizers who had 5 visits from BJP home squads coming and trying to persuade them to vote for the BJP candidate. This is seriously effective campaign organization. And it's a miracle to be able to survive that kind of onslaught. And I'm grateful to the voters of Thiruvananthapuram for having had the faith to do that. But this is what we should be prepared for. It's a well-financed, well-organized, diligent, hard-working election machine with a leader who enjoys a personality cult. And whereas in the south we still have some immunity to some of their messaging, in the north they've turned out to be incredibly effective. I don't think that any of us expected them to do as well in UP, for example, as they did. We thought there'd be some anti-incumbency, and so, which is a typical factor in Indian elections. There wasn't. But Trinamool showed them they could be beaten.
Yeah.
So it depends on where. Bengal is not UP. And I'm hoping that that Kerala will also be able to have continue to be the last redoubt, as it were. Tamil Nadu and Kerala, I think, still have a different orientation on all the key issues that the BJP would disagree with the other ideology on. We are the separate ones.
So they will find it tough this time also in Kerala.
I think that they are not going to find it easy to make a major impact. But to say that they will constantly be stuck at where they are depends on a lot of factors. Remember, a lot of voting decisions are made at the last minute. I would say the core support base of BJP has not grown at all. And the NDA itself, including in Kerala, has already crumbled a bit with C.K. Janu's party leaving and so on. I'm not sure about the degree of commitment of some of their other partners. So I think the core support is what is, but on what issues people will be voting. In North India, for example, up to January 2019, the economy was a dominant issue and they were doing really badly on the economy. Then suddenly Pulwama happened, Balakot happened, the complete narrative changed in the north. So you can't really, a year and a half before an election, start making prognostications about who's going to do how. But I would say, as a general feature, the characteristic of our states, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, are much more resistant to the traditional BJP appeal, which is essentially the Hindutva message. Much more resistant than many of the states in the north have turned out to be.
So in Kerala, it's going to be either between LDF and UDF. The fight will be between them.
Or if other forces come up. Now, we've seen, for example, that Aam Aadmi Party has announced that they're going to start an effort in Kerala. Other parties are also looking at testing the waters here. I'm not ruling out the possibility of yet another front or yet another group coming into the state. But you know, we have to look at all the possibilities. Ultimately, what do the people want to see? And can we find a political force that can give them what they want to see? That's the key issue. Now, when it comes to a parliamentary election, there's also the question of the national government and who's realistically positioned to take on the national party there and so on. When it comes to state elections, it's a different set of issues that focus on governing here. And that's why I think 24 and 26 may be different kinds of issues in Kerala, different kinds of stories. I'm certainly paying a lot of attention to both.